Okay, I'd love to, we've got about 15 minutes left here, and I'd love to have a conversation with all the panelists about what we've just heard from everybody. Wow, when we began to think about all the speakers that would come together on this, it was hard to envision how it all would fit, but it has been an incredible breadth and sort of movement through all these topics of character development, the inner life, grace being this environment, the leader backpack, just the reflection at the pond and now. So I feel like there's a couple of themes that are woven through here. One of them is, of course, this inner work that takes so much time. And Michaela, what you said was so brilliant. It's like people aren't so averse to change. They're averse to loss. And any kind of change requires loss. So there's this reflection that we all have to do, whether we're looking at our failures and our wins, our losses, all those things kind of pull together. But so just a question to any of you, and I'd love to just hear you guys talk a little bit more about this inner life, as we move forward into this next year. And all of the people who are listening now and in the future, they'll tune in and listen on. What is it, what's kind of the main theme that we can take away from what we've talked about here? Somebody, or ask some questions here as to sort of the main takeaway from our time together. I'll just leave it there as an open question. I've kind of made my theories there, but I'll let you guys expound on that. That wasn't a very clear question, was it? It was more like, here we go. What takeaway from all these talks would you like to sort of highlight? What stuck out to you in these sessions? Go.
Well, I was just going to add that I think, when you talk about themes getting woven together, I think the intentionality for those of us who are leading and are often in very public spaces and often have to be very outer to be able to attend to the inner, to be able to rest and return, to sit on the dock, to be able to be filled up that way, to be able to attend to the change and the loss that is happening in our own world. So that as we go out and create environments of grace for other people and do all those C's that Nancy talked about, it's coming not from a place of having to prove ourselves, but from a place of having that richness that only God can give us. I feel like that's kind of a thread that I'm seeing and hearing today.
Yeah, I've heard the word attend several times. And Marjorie Thompson, in her book Soul Feast, which is just a wonderful book to cultivate soul shaping practices in your life. But one thing that really stood out to me is a concept of, work, vacation, and that we're in this cycle, right? And we get to the vacation and then we rejuvenate and then we jump back in. And she talks about holy leisure, like living in that center of holy leisure. It's rest, vocation. And that was just alarming to me when I first read it. I was like, well, it totally makes sense. How come I haven't seen this, But I think just being caught in the frantic and the academic world and being able to step back and go, wow, you mean I can let life happen and rest and move into calling, like doing a passion talk as you're led. I think it's a bit of a cultural shift for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, cultural shift. Speaking of cultural shifts, we've all sort of touched on a cultural shift or a shift of some kind, whether it's thinking about grace being an environment, or whether it's thinking about transitions and so forth. We all have come at this from different perspectives. So we've all touched on these different dimensions. How would any of you like to sort of speak more directly to this idea of leading differently? How do we lead differently, sort of given our general sort of posture of following Jesus? How do we lead differently given what we have ourselves sort of learned about being attentive to the inner life?
Let me just jump in on kind of what we've already been talking about. I think that one of the invitations for leading different actually has a lot to do with rest. I think that, Walter Brueggemann says, like, there's a difference between choosing or like saying, hey, we're going to live a life of rest, and then actually doing that. And seeing, when you think about Sabbath and 10 Commandments and what's happening there, and the Israelites being pulled out of a system of corruption and greed and being exploited. And it's like, actually, this is the way it's going to be in God's kingdom. It's pretty critical. And it's like, well, systems of corruption and greed and, exploitation. Oh, wow. We don't have to actually look very far to see those today. And so when you talk about leading differently, I think there's something there. I don't think I have any answers, but I think, where Lisa's going and what Andrea was talking about, I would start there in terms of leading differently.
That's what struck me today as well, was this whole rhythm of learning to rest appropriately. And I'm on a panel here with a bunch of really strong leaders who are very active people, and they're talking about rest in so many different kinds of ways so that we can pay attention to people that stream through our lives so quickly, but who are the people that I am to give attention to at this season of my life. And so that was kind of a synthesis for me, and also a number of the scriptures that were shared have to do with this rest, have to do with this relationship that causes us to lead differently, certainly for me, than if I didn't know Jesus. I wouldn't be thinking about this topic or this synthesis that came across through all the speakers today.
Another word I heard a lot was humility. And it's so tied to rest. I think so often we don't rest because everything will fall apart if I'm not doing all the things. And it takes humility to be able to step back and say, I'm not the only one that's capable. And so I think those two kind of are two sides of the same coin. So I love that. I think Bruce and Nancy both, if I'm remembering right, both kind of brought up the role of humility as leaders.
Yeah, and the way you just tied that together and with the idea of Sabbath, Andrea, is so critical, right? That in order for us to really rest as leaders, we have to believe that maybe God's in control of a few things. And, we can maybe let go of one day or whatever period of time, we're not going to be legalistic here, but that invitation of God to say, hey, once in a while, just sort of test me out on this, take a break and see if things really fall apart, or if I can really catch it for you. We kind of worry, I think, about that. And so pulling together this idea of Sabbath, and in fact, if you were listening to the earlier session on work, that they talked about this topic as well, and how critical it is. In my work and conversations in the Vineyard, here's the thing. It's the vineyard can't produce a crop every season. Oh no. I mean, we get that, right? It has to go through winter and spring and summer, all of those things before it gets to harvest. And part of that rhythm is this rest. It's this dormancy that looks kind of like death. You know, I had a friend who moved to wine country a few years back, and she was driving out in the vineyards during the winter. And she said to the person who was driving her around, she goes, "What are those sticks in the ground? Like, who just plants sticks?" Well, if you've ever been in a vineyard in winter, you do. You just see these like dead sticks sticking up out of the ground. They look dead. But listen, if we didn't have that season, there would be no harvest, right? So that metaphor also translates into our life as a leader. We cannot have harvest 12 months out of the year like we will in the new creation, perhaps along that river of life. But if we don't rest, if we don't reflect, if we don't stop, if we don't think about that, what's happening in those small spaces in our life, we just won't be able to have the harvest that we're looking for as leaders, that fruitfulness that we're looking for as leaders. Yeah. So just any last thoughts or questions here in terms of taking it home for us, reflecting, resting, stepping into that environment of grace. I'm still thinking about a bubble of grace. You know, after Bruce talked, I had this image of just getting wrapped in this bubble of grace, and that feels very restful to me. Any last thoughts or words for our audience today?
I guess one thing that I would want to encourage our audience with is it can be so overwhelming, especially when you go to a conference like this, you hear so many good things and you want to incorporate all of them immediately. And there is also that piece that makes you feel like you haven't been doing it right. So just encouraging everyone to have grace with yourself, to take the little bits that you are getting, trust the Spirit to nurture in you the phrases that the Spirit wants you to remember and apply, and know that it is a long journey. So every little baby step that we can take as leaders to be more aligned with what Christ is calling us each to will get us closer. And it's that journey, right? So just, I know it's hard to don't be overwhelmed. That's what I'm saying. Don't be overwhelmed as if you could predict how you feel. But anyway, yes, that.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes, don't be overwhelmed. It is easy. Remembering that each breath gets us a little closer to understanding these things. Yes, one baby step at a time, one drop of water, one tiny bud, one breath, one bubble of grace, one transition, one letting go of something from the backpack. We've learned so much on this session, and I just couldn't be more grateful to all of you who have brought your wisdom and time and energy to all of us. So many blessings on you all as you continue to lead in your contexts. We'll be keeping our eyes out for all the good things that you're doing. And we just encourage those who have been following along and listening in to just take one more breath, one more step, reflect, rest, and trust God. So we'll leave it at that. And we'll say goodbye for now. Thank you so much.
Great job. Appreciate it.